Good afternoon. It is 1:15 on the 17th, and we have two items for our afternoon, H 554. Act relating to approval of the adoption of the charter of the town of South Hero. It's here because of a local option tax. And then at 2 o'clock, we are going to talk about our Budget Adjustment Act memo. It is my hope and belief that we have talked through already every item in that memo. This is just looking it over and giving it a final say-so. And then we have the floor at 3. And so with that, Representative Morgan, do you want to
Indeed.
tell us about your charter?
Good afternoon, everybody. Representative Michael Morgan, represent the Grand Isle Chittenden District, hence why I'm here, having introduced this charter for the town of South Hero. With me is Mr. David Carter, Chair of the South Hero Select Board, who will wow and zow you with the details of the bill. I'll just give you a real quick thumbnail sketch.
And before you start,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Carter, do you want to introduce yourself for the record since you're sitting there? Can you introduce yourself?
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
David Clinton Carter. I'm chairman of the Select Board in South Hero. And here to talk about the local option tax and hopefully adoption of our charter.
Thank you. And are you also the chief financial officer, or is that a typo?
I'm not a chief finance.
Okay, great.
Not
Okay.
just.
Great. Thank you. Representative Morgan.
Yes, so simply right out of the title of the bill, and I'll just turn it over to him, is the bill is proposing a local option tax on 3 items, rooms, meals, and alcoholic beverages. And then it speaks to appointment of a town auditor and a town administrator and the other guts of the bill. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Carter and let him kind of give you a little more of the history and the vote and how it came to get here today.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me here. It's nice to be down to the legislature.
Nice to have you here. Thanks for
Well,
coming
thank
in.
you. About a little over 2 years ago, we decided in the select board to explore the opportunities that would come with enacting a local option tax. So we looked at the statute, and the statute said you can put the article before the voters, and a local option tax could be passed and enacted. So we did that in a the March meeting in 2022, and the local option passed 289 yes to 209 no, which is about 65%.
How many people live in?
About 1,650 people. So we had about 600 votes. So we then brought that forth and contacted the tax department, and they said, "Oh, sure, we'll have you enact it." And they started the process until the deputy commissioner called up our treasurer and said, "Oh, wait a minute, there's a couple tripwires here. Number one is,
Missed a step.
yes, you don't have a charter." And they pointed out that in 1997, the education tax bill was passed that said if a town didn't have an equalized tax rate of under $1.10 per hundred, then you didn't qualify to have a local option tax, and you had to get a charter. And I said, but our local education tax was $1.06, but that's not the equalized tax rate. We were $1.12, 2 cents too high.
That was an Act 60 compromise.
Yeah,
Up in, yeah.
1997. So that's the tripwire that keeps a lot of towns from getting automatically getting a local option tax in, come back and get a charter. So that by that time was the end of the session. So I'm a retired lawyer, which is always trouble.
You don't sound very retired.
My wife doesn't think so either. And so I pulled out Title 24, and I cribbed from several towns, Calais, Barry, Jericho, and looked at and drafted up a draft charter and shared it with my representative. We also then had to certify that that it was acceptable. So we put it to a vote list last August 1st, and that passed 380 yes to 220 no, again, 65%. So we had a very overwhelming support for the charter. We then had to certify that we followed all the steps which is required, and the town clerk certified all of the different steps and aspects, sent it on to the Secretary of State. They then sent it on to the Attorney General's office, and then they sent it on to my good friend Tucker Anderson over here. And Tucker has also laid eyes on it, made a couple little minor tweaks and suggestions. And so there we are after 2 years working, bringing it forth, looking for approval so we can have that. It's just, I would bring your attention to an article that is in yesterday or today's Digger, talking about our process in South Hero, how I think there's 62 towns that have charters that would qualify to get local option tax. But we're hoping with our local option tax, we have 10 venues that sell food, 7 venues in South Hero that sell alcohol. 3 of the venues that sell food are seasonal, so 7 year-round venues. We are definitely a tourist town. We get tourists, the cyclists that come up from Burlington on the bike ferry. We also have well over 1 million vehicles that cross the Grand Isle Ferry and come drive through South Hero, as well as the additional 1 million residents and tourists that drive in onto the islands. I hope most of you have been out to the islands. Somebody here says they love the donuts. I won't mention, but come out to the islands, and we are a tourist town. And I think it's an opportunity for tourist towns like South Hero to generate a little extra revenue. We're looking at least 40,000 for the town and probably 20,000 to go to the state for processing the local option tax.
Some communities create a special fund that their local option tax goes into that they use for very specific purposes. Is that something that you all are doing?
Yes, we're going to do that to support. We're hoping to get a 3-acre parcel for a new town park, and also to eventually maintain our 1816 old white meeting house that we're in the process of start renovating, restoring.
Sound like lovely purposes.
Yes, we're in the first parts, but we're trying to restore that.
And I encourage you to, there are a number of grants that I'm sure you're accessing for.
We're working on
You got one, right?
federal grants. We did some ARPA funds.
And the Preservation Trust, I think, is another.
Preservation Trust, a Bruin grant, and we're looking at several other private contributions for that. So the restoration, it's just going to take a while. We're also working and have contacted a company in Huntington that does timber frame work. And they looked at the timber frame and say it's, a stable structure, but this timber frame company currently is tied up working on a 1,000-year-old structure in an island in the middle of Paris, Notre Dame. So until they finish Notre Dame, they'll be, and when they finish that, they can come back to us.
That seems worth waiting for.
Yes.
Really appreciate your patience through the charter process. It's important to us that we sort of go through all of these steps, not just because of statute, but because recently as more and more towns are adopting local option taxes, it often becomes more and more confusing for taxpayers. We have a really lovely map about how confusing zip codes are in Vermont that I'm happy to share with you if you're ever interested. I understand if you're not. But so appreciate your patience with this process. Does anyone in the committee have any questions about what they're intending? Yeah.
Does the charter specify where the money goes specifically towards certain things, or does it just say it puts it in the fund?
And we're gonna look through the charter with Tucker as well.
Tucker's assisted us with that. Yeah.
It answers yes real quickly, but we'll let him elaborate if that's what you prefer. I can read that portion to you if you want.
We can have Tucker take us through it.
Okay.
Thank you. Representative Sims?
Thank you for sharing your journey, and glad you're getting closer to the end of the finish line here. Maybe I do think this story highlights broader conversation about the different paths that different municipalities have to access different tools, and strongly stress as a committee to continue a broader conversation about how do we think about revenue sharing in an equitable way that all towns have access to.
Absolutely. Yes, Representative Brannigan.
Revenue sharing, common paths. Where is that plan to extend this to every county?
It's somewhere on that wall. I'm
Good.
not sure where.
There's a great bill, few bills on the
There are
wall.
a few bills floating around. I think Representative Canfield has one of them if you want to check in with him, but maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I haven't had as much time to look at the wall as I probably should have at this point.
44.
Thank you.
Any further questions for our witnesses team? Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your patience. We're gonna hear from Tucker and then we'll take a vote. You're welcome to stay while we vote, but I can't
We will.
imagine there are gonna be any anomalies.
Happy to wait.
Okay, thank you.
Right, good afternoon. For the record, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. You have in front of you H554, which will approve the adoption of the charter of the town of South Hero. I'll focus in on the money, ways and meansy related issues that are in here. First two, I try to invent something new for this committee every time I'm in here. It's so rare. We get to enjoy each other's company. The first two that I'll highlight quickly, I know that there's been some work done with listers at the local level and some review of some of the other financial officers at the local level. In this charter, the town is proposing to have their listers be 3 listers that are appointed by the select board. And they are also intending to shift their town auditor to an appointed position to carry out all the statutory duties of auditors and finally to perform at minimum through a certified public accountant, a triennial review of the town's finances. Okay, quick hits about their financial officers and on to the local option tax, which is in section 7 of the bill on page 4 if you're looking at the as introduced version. This authorizes the select board to impose a 1% local option tax on meals, rooms, and alcoholic beverages. It provides that this will be collected and administered pursuant to state law 24 VSA section 138, which I know you are all intimately familiar with by this point. And finally, in subsection C, that the town's share of the revenues, which is 70% minus the per return fee that may be collected by the Department of Taxes, will be put towards property maintenance and projects within the town of South Hero. Pretty short, fairly sweet.
Any questions? Representative Anthony and then Andrews.
Maintenance of property owned by South Hero.
I believe that would be the presumption here, but it does not say town property. It says maintenance of property within the town of South Hero.
Then it doesn't say it, it doesn't mean it.
It is not
Limited to
specifically
town property.
limited through the text on the page. Yes.
Representative Andrews?
I believe my question might be for Mr. Carter, just as a clarification. So the park that you referenced, is that already the land owned by the town already?
Not as yet. We have a developer who's going through the process of doing some permitting. And he is the better person to do the permitting because of other tripwires permitting process. And it is adjacent to the old White Meeting House. And the purpose of the funds is to support the maintenance of that building as well as our town office and other town properties.
The reason I'm asking the question is just to clarify, I did not hear Tucker say for the purchase of land. So would the
No.
land be purchased
It's
with
being
other
donated.
funds? Oh, wonderful. Okay,
The
thank you.
land's being donated.
I just wanted to make sure that was all.
For that.
And, towns are under no obligation to designate the purpose of local option taxes. It's just sort of a nice thing that happens sometimes that I feel warmly towards, but I don't want to say it is in any way a barrier to getting a local option tax. Yes,
So,
Representative Brannigan.
Madam Chair, there may have been other communities who adopted a local option tax after this one, but the one I'm very familiar with is St. Albans Town. So in St. Albans Town, the deal was that they were quite sure that folks coming down from Quebec would shop in the Walmart and the two big grocery stores, and there's also a huge hardware store there. I'm trying not to say the rest of their names, but
Okay, thank
they, sorry. Then came the pandemic.
Mhm.
And we saw, all travel over the border stopped.
Mhm.
And so we saw that the people who were supporting those stores and paying the local option tax was local people from St. Albans Town and surrounding communities, including mine, the town of Georgia.
Mhm.
So I just want to point that out, that things don't always pan out the way we think they're going to. That ferry is coming over now, but it's private business. We don't know if that's all going to continue forever. There almost ought to be a plan B. And referring to the comment about the property, I think we ought to specify the property so that it's not private property we're supporting.
So one, I would, agree with you about the local option taxes are sometimes much more paid by locals than tourists. And certainly the same is true in Brattleboro, especially since the Wayfair decision, when any online ordering is subject to local option tax. But the purpose of where this money goes is really absolutely the discussion of the town. So
Okay.
I feel like they're still meeting Tucker, I'll defer to you, but it seems to me they're still meeting their intent, even with the language vague. So I don't know if it's up to us to be correcting that.
Well, this is of course not going to operate in a vacuum. So if the town for some reason decides to take local option tax revenue, which is an ad valorem tax that applies to anyone who is purchasing these things, and give it to a private person, there are probably going to be other constitutional and legal concerns about taking tax funds and giving it to private individuals. So the town still be obligated to meet those other legal obligations, and hopefully they have a truly excellent municipal attorney who will tell them why they should not be taking tax dollars and giving it to private individuals and their property.
Just let it go then.
My preference would be to let it go, since it seems it's more the business of the town than
Okay.
our business.
All right.
But I'm sort of rigid about charter changes being mostly none of my business. For better or for worse. Any other questions from anyone? We have a fiscal note that I would call people's attention to. That is
I asked
posted.
him to zoom in.
Okay.
And it is posted. You might
Okay.
need to refresh.
Okay. It looks pretty much like every other charter change to me. Does anyone have any questions about the fiscal note? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion about the local option tax? Yes, Representative Anthony.
I move that we accept the charter proposal with the option tax included.
Okay, wonderful. Second, okay. Representative Anthony moved, Representative Maslin seconded. There were photographs taken.
Commemorating that first committee official vote. It's a big moment.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, if the clerk could please call the roll.
Andrews, yes. Anthony,
Yes.
Beck,
Yes.
Brannigan,
Yes.
Demro,
Yes.
Maslin,
Yep.
Mattos,
Yes.
Odie,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Canfield,
Yes.
Kornheiser.
Yes.
12-0-0.
Wonderful, thank you, congratulations. Next steps on your journey.
Hope to see you all in South Hero sometime.
I look forward to it.
I look forward to paying your local option tax.
Yeah, when I come to visit.
Okay, switching gears significantly, we're gonna move to our budget adjustment conversation. Chris, if you want to join us. So, as everyone knows, unlike other committees, we are not really spending money in budget adjustment. We just overseeing some of the language suggestions essentially. But if you could take us through the letter, Chris, that would be great.
Sure. For the record, Chris Roop, Joint Fiscal, is it the committee's preference that I share the text or?
Yes, then we have a communal experience.
So could you send me the link? I believe Sorsha kindly posted a version of this on the committee webpage under my name today.
You did indeed.
Thank you, Sorsha. Share my screen. Okay. Too big.
That's true.
Just being a little slow here. All right. So the chair asked me to take a quick stab at putting some words to paper to try to capture some of the committee's conversation a few days ago about the Governor's Budget Adjustment Act. So some of what I'm going to go through references sections that were in the document that was provided by the administration. And I have a little table here that just sort of refreshes your memory of what some of those things are. But just to sort of walk you through this really quickly, the memo's 13 pages, but we're not going to go line by line. A lot of it is fairly straightforward and we can skim right through. But I just wanted to orient the committee that there's sort of a cover memo here that has some supporting documentation and language that follows. The first is just to acknowledge the 10 language sections that were included in the governor's recommend, which are summarized in a table that's going to follow. And I have a comment here that the treasurer's proposed language pertaining to the COLA for the teacher retirement system that you all took testimony on. I have a reference here to that language, and that full language is appended to the end of this memo. So the Committee on Appropriations will have the text. The text that is in this memo was the product of Ledge Council taking the language that the Treasurer's Office suggested and just doing a little bit of wordsmithing, but both parties had seen that. And the third piece here references this committee's discussion about the Vermont Strong commemorative license plates that my colleague from Ledge Council walked you through a few days ago. Recall that back in 2012, after Tropical Storm Irene, the General Assembly passed legislation to authorize and create the original iteration of those Vermont Strong plates. That legislation stipulated the fee amount and directed the proceeds to nonprofit organizations. Fast forward to this summer, when there was another iteration of the plates launched by executive order. That executive order modified the fee structure and changed the recipients of the funds from what was originally approved by the legislature after Tropical Storm Irene. So the intent of the language that is included here, which is the same as what Ledge Council walked you through a few days ago, would be to sort of retroactively authorize the plates and the revenue allocation that was contemplated in the executive order up until the effective date. Upon the effective date, the proceeds from the plates would instead go to the general fund to be used for flood relief rather than directed to ACCD and to the Community Foundation. And the language would also stipulate that moving forward after the effective date that the state would no longer be authorized to enter into bundled promotions. So that language is at the very end and we can walk through that, but some of the text here in the memo is just sort of very technical in nature, but articulates the background that I just verbally tried to repeat to you. I do have a little placeholder here for the committee vote once you all have a chance to review these recommendations. I have that highlighted so I don't update it. Bless you.
That's sure.
So let's get a little bit more into some of the substance here. I have a little chart here that, hey, hopefully you can see. So there were 10 sections of the governor's language that the committee took testimony on from finance and management and others. So this little chart here focuses on those 10 pieces. The first 5 pieces are all thematically related to after school and summer learning funding. So there's just one box on this chart that captures all of those. There were several mechanical pieces that were proposed that would redirect the sales tax proceeds from cannabis retail sales to a newly created special fund. Currently, those revenues go into the ed fund. The construct that was recommended would be to instead fund these programs instead of directly from the ed fund through this after school special fund. So these 5 sections are all thematically related to executing that proposal and staying within the theme of keeping the sales tax proceeds from cannabis retail sales directed to those programs. Are there any questions with that piece? Great. There are several other pieces here that I just wanted to touch on briefly. Section 46 dealt with some technical corrections. There were some double appropriations that were reflected in both the B section where the base appropriations are reflected and the D sections where the transfers are reflected. The administration proposed some technical corrections to deduplicate some of those and to change some of the terminology related to special funds from appropriation to allocation. These are really purely technical changes. Section 48 was an update of the sports wagering direct application revenue estimate based on more recent information. You recall that the early estimates did not take into account the fact that there were 3 operators paying a higher revenue share than they ultimately agreed to. So those 2 factors led to the administration upwardly revising their expectations for sports wagering direct apps. And there was also a technical piece here that would transfer the balance of the registration fees fund to the general fund, because apparently the registration fees fund was repealed several years ago. I have not gone down the rabbit hole of digging up the history of the registration fees fund, but I am happy to if you all would like me to.
We're good.
All right. Section 50, the Tax Computer System Modernization Fund. There were some technical language proposed here that, there were really some very few words changed, and the words that were recommended to be changed really just provided clarity and ensured that the modernization special fund balance that was in the fund at the end of last fiscal year remains within the fund. That is not a departure from the intent you all expressed in the language that you previously adopted, but there were a few words that were changed or proposed to be changed just to provide a little grammatical clarity around that. Section 61 pertained to Act 250 fees. This language would clarify statute to reflect that the fees are charged on an individual permit or permit application basis. The language would codify the longstanding practice and conform the language to a recent court decision that I would suggest you hear from Ledge Counsel on. But my understanding is that this language is not a significant departure from what's currently in practice. The final piece, Section 63, would clarify some of the language around allowable uses of ed fund dollars to make it clear that revenue collection is an allowable use, recall that the the tax computer modernization fund receives a small amount of money from the ed fund, and that is the systems that tax uses, help collect and manage all of the money that comes into the ed fund. So the language, the addition of the words revenue collection are proposed to be included in 16 VSA 4025 to recognize the fact that some of the proceeds of that tax computer modernization fund, which benefits the tax department, goes into collecting the money that goes into the ed fund. Any questions on that?
It's not.
Great.
Yeah.
Sir.
So, when the license plate,
Oh, we're not quite there yet.
oh, okay, sorry.
Or I guess we're
Almost there.
almost there. Yeah. Just 1 second.
I can jump to it if you want.
No, I thought you were. Did we go through the whole thing?
There's one more piece before
Okay.
that.
Sorry.
So the teacher pension COLA language. You all took testimony on this. Recall that there was some legislative intent expressed in Act 78 in the budget that you passed last session to reserve $9.1 million to fund a prospective change to the COLA law moving forward. There was also language that directed the treasurer to rerun the cost analysis of what the actuaries think making that change would cost, because a year ago, when you all were here, the pension systems were right about to perform their next round of experience studies. They do those studies every 3 years. And those studies often inform changes to the actuarial assumptions. So the concern of making this change a year ago was, all right, we've got a price tag based on the assumptions in place at the time. If the systems are about to do these studies and they might change their assumptions, the price tag might change. So the language that you all put in the budget fenced off the $9.1 million to be used for future, to fund a future change, directed the treasurer to rerun the analysis and provide a revised cost estimate. He did so. The revised cost estimate is $9.5 million to fund the present value of that change. You already have $9.1 million in reserve. Last year, one other piece was $3 million was appropriated to the teacher pension system to fund a one-time payment to retirees last calendar year to make up for that 1 year of really high inflation. The actual price tag came in a little bit less than that $3 million. It came in at about $2.84 million when you factor in the actuarial services and everything else. So that means there was a $160,000 sort of surplus payment already made to the teacher pension fund. We can credit that against the $9.5 million bill to change the COLA law. So the net difference that would need to be reflected in the BAA would be $9.34 million. And that cost, when the actuaries run their really sophisticated economic models, that cost represents the present value of sort of the expected risk of the likelihood of inflation at some point in the future, causing a higher cost. So funding that cost now is a way of making sure that that risk doesn't just add to the unfunded liability, which the state would have to pay back with interest over time.
And am I remembering right that we have already accounted for all of this in all of our outlooks and conversations?
It is accounted for, yes.
Any questions on this?
So, and the language is not particularly thrilling to read. It is here. I'm happy to go through it if you'd like, but there are just a couple technical housekeeping measures that were cleaned up to make the statute read a little clearer while folks were looking at it, and made the applicable changes to make sure that the maximums applied appropriately to the size of the COLA and not to the amount of the CPI change that's used to calculate. The final piece, Representative Canfield, is the Vermont Strong License Plate section. So there were no changes made to this language from what you all saw recently. No substantive changes anyway. There was I think there was one word changed around instead of saying flood relief for natural disaster relief on page 13. But the theme here of the language is consistent with what you all saw about a week ago, where section A of the language, which is the bulk of the language, essentially updates the session law to conform to what is currently in practice in the executive order. And then section B sets up the moving forward after the effective date construct. And from then on, the net proceeds from the license plates would go to the general fund for natural disaster relief. And the state would no longer be allowed to enter into bundled promotions moving forward.
That's what I was looking for, the change in the natural disaster language.
Yeah, that is on, where is
See
it?
it,
Yep, you got it.
page 13 at the top.
Correct.
Any other thoughts or questions on this? Any thoughts or questions on sections we've already covered?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the draft BAA memo to Scopes as drafted.
I'll second that.
Representative Demrow moved that we accepted, that we send this letter. Representative Brannigan seconded. We are voting a lot today. Any further discussion? If you could please call the roll.
Andrews, yes. Anthony,
Yes.
Beck,
Yes.
Brannigan,
Yes.
Demrow,
Yes.
Maslin.
Yep.
Maddox,
Yes.
Odie,
Yes.
Sims, Taylor,
Yes.
Canfield,
Yes.
Kornheiser.
Yes,
12-0-0.
wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for doing that work, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Madam Chair.
And then we have been so efficient. It's thrilling. I would love to work on this funny survey that we have to do of reports. Saoirse made printouts for us that she's going to hand out. So, as you all might know, we get a lot of reports. Does anyone on this committee read every single report that is sent to us?
Probably not.
Okay,
I'll try.
I was gonna have like a really special, I was wondering about Kurt too. I was gonna offer a really special prize if anyone did, but I sort of assumed they didn't. Anyway, one of the things that one of the reasons for that is often another committee will request a report and we sort of are the secondary or tertiary recipient of that report. So just because we say we don't need a report anymore on this report sunset survey, doesn't mean we won't get, it doesn't mean that that report will stop happening. But the continuous efforts that we engage in year after year to learn things without regularly reflecting on what we maybe don't need to learn anymore creates a bit of a lot of work for a lot of people across state government. I have absolutely no idea what the color coding means.
Like the date.
Oh, it's dates. Yep.
There's a memo that goes along with it, selected on the website.
Thank you. So if maybe what we could do, since everyone's doing it already, is take a moment or 5 to silently read the memo that's posted on the website. So we have our instructions and then go through the survey ourselves and then we can discuss. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Maybe we could, I think we could go off live while we all do our private homework and we'll come back in 20 minutes for a conversation. Does that sound good? Okay.